That's allblacknationalconvention.com. Also, some of you are going to go to Egypt with us. We're going to Egypt August 2nd or something through the 12th. Now, I would invite you all to go, but the trip is totally sold out. However, we are going to do another trip. So if you'd like to go on the next one, we will let you know when that's going to happen. All right. So let's get started here. All right. So question 47 says, did this is page 147 of the book, The Black History Reader by Dr. Claude Anderson, powernomics.com is where you can get a copy. He says, did Black Americans receive the same economic benefits as whites in Franklin D. Roosevelt's 1930s New Deal? In President Franklin D. Roosevelt's 1932 New Deal program, Black Americans, the people who had suffered the most during the Great Depression, received the least benefits. Surprise, surprise. The stock market crash in 1929 triggered the Great Depression that stalled economies around the world, closed factories and businesses, and brought hard times to everyone's front door. The nation's general unemployment rate was pushed to 25% for whites, which was but it was 2 to 3 times higher for blacks. So they're 25%. We're definitely well above 50, 60, 70%. 1/3 of the nation was ill-fed, ill-housed, and ill-clothed. These conditions propelled Roosevelt, a strong believer in the role and power of the federal government, to campaign for the office of the United States, President of the United States. In his 1932 presidential election campaign, Roosevelt, a Democrat, used rhetoric that gave blacks the impression that he was sympathetic to their economic needs. Roosevelt's slogans expressed a deep concern for the forgotten man and pledged a new deal for the people. Black Americans naturally but erroneously believed the broad terms forgotten man, and the people either referred to or included them. At that time, the majority of blacks belonged to the Republican Party, a continuation of their allegiance to Abraham Lincoln. But in the 1932 election, blacks abandoned the Republican Party and threw their votes to Roosevelt, who won the election with their support. Once in office, Roosevelt and his administration designed a New Deal program for the working class and poor. However, as it turned out, Roosevelt's New Deal did not have blacks in mind. Surprise, surprise. The New Deal did not address the government and culturally imposed reasons blacks were so poverty-stricken in the first place, and provided them only a few low-level jobs, limited healthcare services, and minimal welfare benefits. Within a few short years of implementation of the New Deal, national surveys and social discomfort indicators revealed that in the midst of the Great Depression, economic conditions for blacks grew worse, and the gap between them and whites grew even wider. Eleanor Roosevelt, the wife of Roosevelt, was sympathetic to the conditions of blacks and tried to provide them an entree to her husband. She organized an informal group called the Black Kitchen Cabinet to meet with her and to advise her on black issues, which she presented in her own way to the president. By the 1940s, a significant number of blacks had lost faith in Roosevelt and began to call his New Deal the Dirty Deal. Blacks had experienced a political lesson. Pay attention. He says that in our competitive race-based society, the social construct on race does not allow equal footing. White privilege is structural, and whether conscious or subconscious, the socioeconomic outcomes are foreordained by race. So give me a yes if you follow what was just said here. Dr. Claude Anderson just explained something that I bet none of you learned in school. How many of you learned that in school? Give me a yes if you did not learn this. Let me know if they ignored this and never told you, because this is not the stuff they tell you. They tell you that the New Deal was wonderful for everybody, and it's interesting because they will completely ignore the extreme intense suffering of your great grandparents and what they had to go through, and the fact that they called it the dirty deal, and the fact that they didn't support Roosevelt after this New Deal came out gives the other side of the coin, right? And this is important, right? There is no such thing as one America. There definitely is the black version of America and the white version of America, and then there are other versions in between. And in fact, I remember when O.J. Simpson was acquitted, and that was a stark example of the difference in terms of how whites and blacks see America differently. Though it almost every single city, the black students or black people were cheering and going crazy because they were happy that OJ was acquitted, and the white folks were crying. Like white girls were literally crying, like someone had literally killed one of their relatives, which was so interesting. And I know where my wife and I were, it was the same way. I was at the University of Kentucky at the time. She was at Indiana University, and she was in the Black Student Union. They were just going crazy, and she looked over and saw the white people crying, and I saw the same thing at the University of Kentucky. So there's different realities here, and I think that an understanding of the black reality is really important because I think think that what they try to do is get you to let your guard down and make you think that racism is a thing of the past. They make you think that some other issue outside of blackness is more important. So rather than being black first, they train you to become gay first, or rather than being black first, it's like you're a woman first, or you're whatever it is, right? And my belief is that no, you're black first. Black first means that being black creates a unique experience such that that unique experience requires unique remedies and unique solutions. And those unique solutions are not just whites versus minorities, it's foundational black Americans, whatever you want to call it, American descendants of slaves, whatever you want to call it. But there are issues specific to those of you who are descendants of slavery that do not belong to anybody else. So that means that any reparations plan has to start there. It has to start there. It has to start there. So, but obviously, you know that's not going to occur. What's going to happen is whatever the plan is, everybody else is going to jump on board because I think that there's this inherent feeling amongst other groups that look, if the black people are getting it, we should get it too. If they're getting it, we should get it first. You know, if I'm a feminist, it's like, well, no. If black people are getting it, then you know we got to get it, right? Or how dare you treat us worse than you treat the black people? Like I think that that's kind of the sentiment and the understanding, and I think it's very important that we fight for whatever it is that we think we deserve. So I'll leave that up to you to decide what that looks like. Now let's go to page 148 of the Black History Reader by Dr. Claude Anderson. This is powernomics.com is his website. I'm repeating that for those of you that just came in. So, question 48 is this. This is interesting. This is a great Juneteenth lesson as well in terms of what's going to be required to fix the economic and social issues that exist in the community. He brings up a World War II style Marshall Plan. He asks, question 48, does Black America need a World War II type Marshall Plan? Black Americans entered the 21st century as an impoverished and politically abandoned people, still suffering from socioeconomic pathologies and the legacies of slavery. Astronomically high rates of now let's make note of this. I need us to really meditate on the issues, meditate on the suffering so you can understand what's going on so you'll know how important the solution is. Astronomically high rates of unemployment, homicides, failing schools, incarcerations, drug addiction, and dysfunctional families will be made worse by an apathetic majority society that is fixated on supporting immigrants and class minorities. Black America needs a World War II type of urban Marshall Plan to address this dilemma, just as this country invested $12 billion and relocated 300,000 European Jews in the late 1940s to aid Germany's recovery. Even in the fall of 2016, President Barack Obama's administration continued World War II efforts in support of European Jews and approved $24 million for Holocaust survivors in the U.S. living below the national poverty line. While this is a generous gesture, no similar level of concern seems to have been made to relieve the distress of the more than 50% of Black American families who live on incomes below the national poverty line 156 years after slavery officially ended. The protracted problems that Blacks endure today in America are similar in nearly every respect to the conditions in Germany following World War II, conditions which were justified for the aid the U.S. gave to the nation that it had just fought for 4 years. The U.S., so they fought Germany, so Germany is an enemy of the United States, and they did more for them than they did for people in their own country. Isn't that interesting? In fact, does anybody remember when, who was it? Oh gosh, Joe Louis fought Max Schmeling back, I guess, during World War II or around that time. And Joe Louis, you know, he died broke, right? I guess there was some financial management issues kind of going on. And I know that he lost a lot of his boxing years volunteering for the military to prove his patriotism. And as a result, they caused him some IRS problems because they started to tax him in a way that wasn't appropriate and wasn't fair. But one thing I remember reading was that Coca-Cola hired Max Schmeling, if I'm not mistaken, who Joe Louis had fought, who was out of Nazi Germany, and they didn't give any opportunities to Joe Louis.